Ekabo.
Ekabo.
Lafia Share Lafia Ni. Everybody. We give thanks to Olodumare, to the Creator.
Ashe.
We give thanks to the ancestors.
Ibashe.
We give thanks to you, the Orisha.
Ashe.
If I Bawashe, Edumare Bawashe, I want to let you go Bawashe.
Ashe.
They will make a way for us. We thank you for your love, for your support, and for your viewership and riding with us with Let's Talk IFA, with the podcast. I am Awo Ifa Jaminire.
I am Awo Ifa Tegonshe.
And you are tuned into
the best,
the greatest
podcast
on the planet Earth.
Let's Talk IFA.
I say. We pray that everybody is well, you and your families, your children, your loved ones, and all of that. So today's topic on this podcast is a simple but powerful one.
Yes.
The importance of honoring the ancestors.
Ancestor veneration.
Yes.
The importance of ancestor veneration.
Yes.
And why we do ancestor veneration.
Yeah. Why do we venerate our ancestors? What's the point?
Well, I say the reason for ancestor veneration is an important part of not just African culture, but when you look around the world, all cultures and traditions honor their ancestors.
I say.
Because it is the way of showing respect to those that came before us. And how do we do that? Because one thing we got to realize is when those ancestors were walking on this physical plane, we were able to communicate with them like, we communicate in real time with each other. But when they made that transition, that doesn't cut off the communication.
I see.
But the ancestors are able to communicate in a different way. And how do we understand what our ancestors are saying to us? And so now it's become more spiritual. The communication, the connection has become more spiritual now when they make that transition. But how do we know our ancestors are around us? How do we know these things? Some people feel it through, they may feel them. When they talk about their ancestors, you hear some people saying, oh, I got goosebumps. I got chills when I was talking about great-grandmother such and such or great-granddaddy such and such. I got goosebumps. Those are sometimes signs that the ancestors are there. We don't walk alone.
I say.
When we walk, our ancestors are with us. Our ancestors follow us. Our ancestors ride with us when we are in motion, when we are moving. Other ways people that we communicate with our ancestors is by setting up an ancestor altar, which is the gateway to communicating with our ancestors.
And like you said, you see this in all cultures, Asian, European, all over the world, all cultures honor and venerate their ancestors. And you mentioned one thing, another way that the ancestors are around. Sometimes you might smell them. You might smell the scent of a particular ancestor if you were close to them or if you knew them. A lot of different ways. Sometimes people can say a certain thing to you. The ancestors would channel themselves sometimes through certain people. And when you got that message, you felt like that came from a particular ancestor because of what they said and how they said it.
Right.
Dreams.
Yes.
Visions, all different type of, ways to communicate that the ancestors can communicate with us.
Even when you're in motion in front of your ancestor altar and you venerating them through songs, through music is another way that the ancestors communicate with us. Because I remember I was at an event and we were this was an ancestral event that we was doing for a family, and we were drumming, and one of the family members started dancing exactly how their deceased family member was dancing, like how they like to dance. You know what I mean? And sometimes that's how you know that the ancestor is present. Like these are various ways of how the ancestors communicate with us. So once the ancestors transition, one of the things that we have to remember is that we should never forget those who've transitioned, because that's not the end.
Right.
You know, don't kick the ancestors out of the community, or don't kick the ancestors out of the family because
not
they
of your memory,
right?
Just because they pass away.
That's another way of venerating your ancestors, is by remembering who they were, their character, the way they presented themselves, the things that they liked, the type of clothes, and how they like to dress. All of those things, when you remember those things, that's a form of ancestor veneration. Yes, you know, you can take food to the altar and things like that. Those are ways of venerating your ancestors. But also giving them the types of drinks that they like. You know, granddaddy loved Southern Comfort. You know, that's what you put on that shrine, because once you do that, you know that ancestor that spirit of the ancestor is gonna smell it and it's gonna come near, and then it'll start communicating with you. Another way is through sound. Like when we have the Opa Iku, the way the diaspora does it, and we tap that Opa to the earth and make that sound, that vibration of that sound, and then when you calling on the ancestor name and you tapping that ancestor staff to the ground and you calling those names, those ancestors hear that sound, that vibration, and then they hear their name, and then they come near. They start coming close because you calling them, and then the sound also attracts the spirit. And so it comes to where you at. So then when you start getting goosebumps, or you start going into certain trances and things like that while in front of your ancestor shrine, that's how we know the ancestors are there. That ancestor shrine is a portal. It's a gateway. You know, when you set up that ancestor shrine, there's a border. That border, some people do it with chalk on the floor, and they draw that line with the efun, and then they draw that line that goes across the wall where the ancestor shrine is at. That represents the connection between the physical realm and the spirit realm. There's a border. We don't cross over there, but we meet. They're there, we're here, and we start communicating with those ancestors. Ancestor veneration is the most powerful form of spirituality that we have, because ancestor veneration teaches us and reminds us of our family customs and traditions, and how we need to move and how we need to respect all of those morals and ethics that our ancestors have passed on to us. It truly is Isheshe, as people say. And so that's why we say, you know, you can call yourself Isheshe this and then and that, but if you're not honoring your mother and father, I don't care how many pots and how many titles you have. If you disrespect your mama and you disrespect your father, then you're not Isheshe, because that's where it starts at. It starts with the honor and respect of your mama, your father, your grandmother, your granddaddy, and your ancestors. It's truly the foundation of our culture, and the continuation of our culture.
Benny. And you mentioned sound a minute ago, right? Also playing songs that they may have liked, singing those songs that they may have liked, dance, any form of expression that you can link to your ancestors, whether you knew them or not. That's why it's important to take the time and find out and do your family research and do your family history, because that's also part of ancestor veneration. And honoring your ancestors is finding out, the more you find out about them, the more you discover about yourself. And how to move. And that's the other part of ancestor veneration, is looking at what they did and how they lived their lives and drawing on that wisdom. And also on the flip side of that, if there were any, negativities that some of the ancestors exhibited, from your family lineage, from your bloodline, you shouldn't do certain things. You can learn from, some of the ancestors that need elevation. You can learn what not to do. That if mental health issues running your family, then you know what you need to focus on and to put extra attention and care in that area. If you know that alcoholism runs in your family, then you already know that you shouldn't drink. Drinking should be a taboo because you're genetically predisposed to that. And we don't want to repeat negative habits from the family lineage. We want to uplift and improve the state of array and blessings in the family lineage, So, and also part of ancestor veneration is healing certain trauma and different things that occurred before you that are going on still spiritually, that are still affecting the family physically. So when you get back in alignment, with that, and you're able to establish that connection and that communication with your ancestors, they will use you as that vessel to, get the rest of the family back in alignment and start to heal. And in the process, we heal the physical family here and heal the spiritual, family that's still in our room. I was talking to someone one day, an elder. It was a lady, black lady, and she'd been in the church all her life and was Christian. And one of the things that they wrestle with, or that they try to deal with, is the fact that, Christianity, they say the dead are dead and they just gone. But I mean, y'all don't really believe that, because you look at Jesus. Is he dead? Jesus was an ancestor, right? So, it's not really a foreign concept if you really look at it. And if you know that we are spirits here having an earthly experience in this human meat suit, in this body that we're in, and that when we die, or quote unquote here, when our life ends here, if you understand that that's not it, energy and matter can't be destroyed. So it just goes somewhere else. So that somewhere else is what we call heaven, or what we call Orun. So Iba Ra Orun King. We pay homage to the citizens of Orun. They're not dead. They're still there, and they want their living relatives to be okay and to do well, because they are there to try to bless us and guide us and protect us. But unless we connect with them, unless we think about them, unless we have that altar, unless we feed them so they can eat the ethereal energy of the food, right? Then they don't have a lot of ashe or a lot of energy to be able to, in turn, help us. If we're not plugged in, like, you can have the most powerful generator in the world, but if you don't plug it into the wall for it to get electricity, it's not going to
power up.
Yeah.
It's not going to power. But you said something very interesting that led me to say that, ancestor roots readings is a way of us understanding who our ancestors are, who they were on earth. The ancestor roots reading breaks a lot of these things we're talking about down, such as the family taboo.
So let's back up for a second. So let's break down what is a roots reading, Idafe Adile. What is it? and how did it come about? Let's talk about some of the history of it before you go on.
Okay, so the Idafa Idile, which is, of course, is the roots reading of one's family lineage, is basically a spiritual investigation on the family lineage that dates back before slavery, right? And so the Idafa Idile came about during the Pan-African movement and going into Yoruba culture, when a lot of our Pan-African leaders started connecting with West African culture, tradition, and spirituality. These Pan-Africanists said, we have to figure out a way of really connecting with our ancestors, because this portal has opened now for us to understand more deeper about Africa. And so we need to figure out who we are. Yes, we Pan-Africanists and this and that, but who are we? Where do our lineage of ancestors come from? One thing we have to realize is and so when they start looking back at the transatlantic slave trade, they discovered that a lot of our ancestors came from West Africa. And so Benin was one of those powerful places that our ancestors came from.
Benin.
And so Dahomey. And so part of, and you know, in Dahomey, they're very strong ancestral people. So Abao Sageman.
So Abao Sageman came up with the idea of the roots reading, correct?
Abao Sageman and some of the chiefs that he was around. But I think they got a lot of that customs and tradition from Benin. Dealing with the ancestors and Vodun. That's where the whole Orisha Vodun came about. And so a lot of those customs of ancestor veneration and that, a lot of that, not to say it didn't come from Oyo and places like that, but Abao Sageman's ancestors were Dahomian. Dahomian. And so that whole concept of doing the roots reading came about to reconnect Africans back to Africa. Not everyone's ancestors is from West Africa, because we know, you know, some of the slaves came from different parts of Africa. However, the IFA practice and the IFA practice, divination, even Erindi Logun or Merindi Logun, was a divination system to help investigate where our ancestors came from. Where did your ancestors come from? Where did your ancestors come from? So that the whole roots reading, Idafa Idile, came from out of that. When Oyotunji was being established, even before Oyotunji, I believe they were those who got initiated were figuring out the system of Africans or African Americans in the diaspora reconnecting with their ancestors. And so divination, Idafa Idile, came about to help reconnect us with our ancestors. And so it's a spiritual investigation that breaks down who your ancestors, who are your ancestors, where they're from, the identity of your ancestral lineage. What are their taboos? You know, you get an African name for that particular lineage. You know,
for your mother's side and your father's side, it's a separate divination.
Right. And so, because most of our ancestors, you may have had ancestors that were from, let's say, Oyo on your father's side, but your mother's side could have been from Ghana or somewhere like Sierra Leone or Congo or something like that.
Anywhere.
Because the transatlantic slave trade, it mixed all of those Africans together.
Benny.
You know what I mean? And so it's a good concept of us figuring out who we are and where we from. A lot of times, a lot of the roots readings that I've done for people, a lot of times they went and got the DNA test and it was spot on.
It matches up. Yeah.
And they said, wow, like my ancestors, in my roots reading, it said my ancestors were from here.
Right.
And then the test said my ancestors are from here.
It usually lines up.
It usually lines up. So IFA as a system is spot on when it comes to that. You don't really need to go and get a test. Have faith in IFA, and IFA will give you a broad understanding of who your ancestors,
who your people were.
And it works.
Benny, I think it's genius, and I think it's a testament to the endurance and the adaptability and the perseverance of, and the wisdom and the genius of our people to, be able to tap back into a spiritual system that, that we kind of lost, that we used to practice, that our ancestors, practiced, and to reconnect with that, but then, make some, not modifications, but make some, everybody does this in their own geographic place, make some tiny, modifications to suit to adapt to the needs of the people in that place, because we're here and most of us, we don't know these things about our ancestors and our ancestral lineage and where our mother's side or lineage comes from in Africa or wherever in the world, and where our father's lineage comes from and who were those. So let's talk about some of the things that are covered in the root. You already named one. You get your family name from your mother's side, a family name for the clan on your father's side, right? Kind of what their main occupation was, and the family, what the family was known for. For instance, for those that don't know, back then your family would be known for a certain thing. Maybe not everybody in the family did it, but your family might be known for Ogun people. They may be hunters, or they might be blacksmiths, or they might be herbalists or healers, or they might be beaters, or they might be traders. They might be, in business and trade with the market, or they might make clothes or whatever it is.
So pretty much the Odu, the family Odu, which is the ruling Odu, will go into the type of profession that these ancestors, the type of work that they did. It could be several things that these ancestors could have mastered.
Right.
And, from being a musician to being a priest to being a hunter, as you stated, agriculture, because we know Africans were big into farming. You know what I mean? Market people, all of those things, warriors, chiefs, noblemen, politicians, people, statesmen, it goes on. But the Odu would give you a understanding of who these people were. The Odu will also let you know how these ancestors were sold into slavery, but not all African people were sold into slavery.
Right.
And that's something that we have to realize, is that, not all Africans were sold into slavery. I know some Idile that I've done, if I confirm, no, these ancestors wasn't sold into slavery. They were navigators. They came over here they were explorers. They were navigators. They were, people who explored the waters, and then they ended up over here in the Americas and settled down and merged them with the natives and things of that sort. That's how deep a roots reading can go. is ancestor veneration. Some of the things that the DeFi Idile points out, as we stated, the taboo, because a lot of times we got to understand that we have our personal taboo, we have our communal
taboos,
but we also have our ancestral taboo.
Ancestor, our family taboos that the whole family adheres to.
Exactly, and that can range from the type of foods you should not eat, because your taboo can be your poison. It can also be behavior. And so a lot of times when we see things like mental illness in someone's personal DeFi, a lot of times that can come from the atrocities of slavery that was passed on, through that lineage. And because it wasn't broken, it got passed down from generation to generation to where it's at now. And so a lot of the healing process for some people with mental illness, and why I'm saying this, and I'm speaking on mental illness, is because a lot of as African descendants from Africa, and the atrocities of slavery and the things that went on, for Africans here in the diaspora, a lot of stuff, a lot of those behaviors come from the slave trade.
Yeah.
And so post-traumatic slavery and all of these things,
post-traumatic stress,
like you got to do. That's
disorder,
why
PTSD.
That's why ancestor veneration here in the diaspora is so powerful. It's some people say, well, you need to do this and do that. No, it starts here with ancestor veneration.
Yeah,
and they gungun, because we have to elevate beyond those atrocities.
Yeah,
we have to embrace. Our ancestors. That's why we do roots reading. That's why one of the first steps you go through when you come into, Yoruba spirituality in the diaspora, you start with ancestors, because it's about reclaiming our identity back. When you learn about your ancestors and who your ancestors were, you get all of this great information, even the information that may say, okay, your ancestors were sold by your own people. You know that information. It teaches you how to navigate and things like that. But it also gives ancestor veneration, gives us pride in ourselves. It helps us to be proud of who we are and where we come from. And when you go out in the world, that's why I tell people when I do roots readings for people, don't just tuck it away. Teach your children. If you got little kids, read the roots reading and make it exciting. Like, it's a bedtime story. Tell it to them as a bedtime story and keep doing that.
Right.
So when they grow up, it's locked in.
That's the oriki of the family.
Yes.
That's the story and how you preserve the history of the family. It should at least be done annually. Like people have a family reunion where either you pick that, or it could be the family reunion or some other time, but it should be an annual celebration where you honor and you celebrate and you venerate your ancestors. It could just be something as simple as inviting the family over, cooking. Before anybody eats, you make a big plate, you set a chair, an empty chair, put that plate of food there, drink everything, light a candle, everybody say a prayer. Before anybody eats, you do that.
Oh, sure.
Talk about the ancestors, thank them, praise them, whatever you want to, however you want to do it. There's no one way to do it, but you're gathering as a family in a communal setting to just say thank you. Just say, hey, we didn't forget about you. Just say their name, to honor them, to venerate them. It is a very powerful thing. And some people do it innately in their family reunions, and they may kind of do it, but and then some families are more intentional about it than others, or some families, like even if they're not practicing any type of African traditional spirituality, some families are just kind of connected like that, and they do things without even really knowing, right? I know my ex-wife, they used to have a ritual that they did every year, and they were from Mississippi. And every year they would go to the grave of one of the progenitors or the matriarch and the patriarch of the family. And every year they would break up the cement and they would repave it. That was their tradition that they would do every year at the cemetery, at the burial site where their ancestors were. And just to give a testament to the roots reading. So I probably had my roots reading done for both sides of the family in maybe 2003, 2004. And I remember Chief Adeyemi Barato, Chief Olaitan Barato. They did my roots reading, my Idafa Idile. And, I never forget on my father's side, it came out that these people were Obatala worshipers.
Orisha
Epa. And that they were priests and that they were chiefs, they were landowners and things like that, right? So then come to find out a few years later, I found out on my father's side, my father grew up on a farm in Wilmington, North Carolina, right? About 2 hours from Norfolk, and which is where I'm from. So then I find out that my great-great-grandfather, Henry Little, and his wife, and my great-great-grandmother, Fanny Little. So my great-great-grandfather refused to be a sharecropper. And he figured out a way, and he bought land a little bit at a time until he accumulated about 65 acres of land, which was why our farm was on, and we owned our farm. And that land is still in our family. So that links up to the roots reading. And not only that, but then I had divination. Something was going on with my dad. So I had divination done for him through Bobby Fabukumi that's in Africa, from Africa. And the ruling Odu was a Warren Meji, but we determined that which I already knew this by this time, that my father was Omo Batala. And he is the patriarch of the family right now. So like all these, I'm just giving a personal experience on the power of it and how it links up. At that time, during the roots reading, I didn't know that my family, that we had that 65 acres and that my great-great-grandfather did that. You know what I'm saying?
It's great.
I say why.
Because my family, the Osadele clan, are also Obatala worshipers. And when I got my Alabawaye, Dafa Orisha birth,
I say,
I'm a Yemonjat priest, but when I got my Alabawaye, it says your Orisha birth is Obatala. And I said, wow, my Orisha is Obatala, but my ancestor, like my Orisha birth is Obatala. And I come from a lineage of Obatala worship. So Ifa is amazing on how Ifa, that whole DNA and how Ifa just...
And the confirmation that you get, the science, and that's how you know when it's real, because you get that confirmation from Black American diaspora Oyotunji priests, and then somebody from Africa that grew up from the root, right? And then it's like it crossed. You get that confirmation from both sides.
That's why it don't matter where you from and where you get divination from. It may be interpreted differently, but at the end of the day, you're going to see how it all comes together. It all comes together, and it broadens just the scope of who you are, where you from, your traditional lineage, and where you going in the future. And ancestor veneration, you cannot, like the Sankofa. Sankofa bird flies forward, but it looks back. Never remembering, never forgetting the past as it moves towards the future. So moving towards the future, it requires you to have that ancestral stability, that ancestral support while you moving towards the future. You can't move forward if you're not connected to your ancestors.
Yep.
You cannot move forward if you are not connected somewhere, somehow to your ancestors.
Yeah, if you don't know, the old saying, if you don't know where you've been, you can't know where you at. And if you don't know where you at, you can't know where you're going. A lot of history, teaching history, has escaped the past few generations, when you really look at it. Yeah. There's not a lot of we're definitely not learning anything in school that's worth anything. So where are we going to learn it? We have to learn it.
We got to teach it to our children.
We have to teach it, rites of passage.
It has to start at home.
It has to be.
Right.
And let's just be honest, every household is not going to function like that where they're teaching history to their kids, right?
It's not.
That's why we have to have our own institutions, whether it's rites of passage or whatever it is that's helping to teach. Because the kids coming up now, they don't know anything about anything unless you sit them down, unless we sit them down and talk to them and educate them about these things, to give them a point of reference so they know how to live their life.
Or if it's not practiced in your home, then your children are going to go out into the world, and if they don't know who they are and where they're from, they're going to not have pride. So let your kids go to school with some Asians, some Caucasians, some whomever from other countries. Those people know their culture.
Yep.
They know about their ancestors. They have pride in it. But let it be your child, and then they don't have no understanding of ancestor veneration. They're going to walk with their head down, around all of these other children of other cultures that's walking with their head up because they're proud of who they are. This thing is about building the pride of our people, building the pride of our children. That's what culture, that's what tradition, and that's what ancestor veneration does. It helps to build our pride and be proud of who we are and where we come from.
Yeah, self-love. Love over hate. It's about loving ourselves, not about hating or disliking any other group, because we don't need to do that. That's a waste of time and energy. But we get labeled for that, for being, if you pro-black, that means that you got to be anti-white.
Right.
And that doesn't necessarily, that don't really equal that.
If you know who you are, you don't really have to be racist towards other people of other cultures when you know your identity.
Knowledge yourself.
You don't have to hate on somebody from another culture because you understand culture. You understand why these people bow the way they do to their mother and their father. But some ignorant people, they'll laugh at that. Yeah. But they're just practicing the customs and traditions of their ancestors. You know what I mean? When we dobale or we ikunle, some ignorant people would say, well, why you on your knees to your mother and father? But no, this is culture. This is what our ancestors did. This is how our ancestors paid respect to their elders and passed it on to us. This is what ancestor veneration gives you. It's very, very important.
And you see what happens when you don't do it, and when you don't have your culture and have your own culture to operate by and venerate your ancestors. What happens is mostly what you're seeing out here today with our youth. Shout out to all the positive youth that are out there it's hard for them. Yeah, you know what I mean? Because we see them and we're around both sides of it. And, I can even remember growing up, like, you want to be sane, but you living in a world that's not sane, that's insane. And you have to go to school with insane people. You got to deal with them. You got to fight them. You got to maneuver them. You got to it's like a jungle. It's snakes, it's gorillas and wolves and bears. And you got to figure out how to navigate this world, especially as a young black man and even as a young black woman. We have to have strong cultural and ancestral foundations and education in place, because if you don't, it's a lot of other places out there for them to end up. Whether they in the street, whether they selling their body for the young women, whether the men, the young boys are getting in the gangs and said they want to sell drugs and sell dope. They have so many negative influences on them. It is society here in Western society has made it so hard for a young black boy or a young black girl to just try to be normal and just be positive.
Yeah.
Because everything is ignorant. You turn on the TV, it's ignorance.
Yeah.
You turn on the radio and the music is ignorance. The images, the music, the words, the movies, the everything. Then you're looking at adults. You're looking at them as an example. Half of them ignorant. You don't know what I'm saying? So your Ori is everything, because I've seen people come out of the worst circumstances and have a great life and become some of the best people. And I've seen some of the people come from the best circumstances and come out to be just crooks and drug addicts and con artists, and they had everything growing up. Yeah. It's all about Ori. And it don't matter where you start. It's about where you end up at. It's about the journey.
And Ori is so important in this tradition, because it actually starts with Ori and then ancestors. That's the start. Right. Because ancestor veneration can be placed right in front of you, but if your Ori is not connecting with it and you don't see the signs, you can drift.
I see it all the time.
And you can get pulled into somebody else's culture. Why do you think when you look in the African American neighborhoods, you see Chinese restaurants? Now you're seeing Indian restaurants. You see Caucasian restaurants. You see Church's Fried Chicken and all of these businesses that are not ours.
Right. And not helping the community at all.
Not helping, it's taking the money out of the community.
So they're taking it to their community, taking it home.
Right, but because we don't know who we are, we don't even patronize those African Americans enough who have businesses. We go right to the people of other cultures that got businesses in our neighborhood. Yeah. We go buy their food.
Yeah.
Because we don't know our foods from our culture, so we buy food from somebody else's culture. We wear their clothes.
All of that.
We do all of the things that they do. They don't mind because they charging for it. And yes, you're paying for it. And so, but when you know who you are and you get a community of African people who know who they are, then you start seeing African businesses come about in those communities. And you might have a few, but there's not a lot that's happening like that.
Yeah.
You got these I always talk about the nail shops that our African women
and the beauty
supplies that our African women spend a bunch of money. And it's like, don't y'all know y'all the best at braiding? Don't y'all know y'all the best at doing nails?
Yeah, we do that.
Don't y'all know y'all the best at manicuring and pedicuring and doing hair? Don't y'all know y'all are the best at it? It's in your DNA.
You'd rather go to the Asians, bro.
Start your own.
Yeah, you see a little bit of it, but not really where it should be. And getting back, I want to touch back on one thing real quick. Get back to the roots reading. We want to finish covering the things that you find out that are covered in the roots reading. Another thing is your family totem or the symbol of your family, right? That symbolizes, it usually has something to do with their career or the profession or what your family was known for. The totem. So a couple more things we're missing. Colors.
What was the color? Usually the color will come from because in the roots reading you find out who the Orisha that governs that family.
The Orisha that governs the family. So your personal Orisha can be whoever, but you will have a patron Orisha of your family lineage from your mother's side. Okay, we're Ogun. That's the patron's Orisha of the family, or Batala, or whatever it is, Oshun, or whoever it is. So that's the other thing that that you find out in the roots reading as well.
Yeah.
A couple other things I think it's a couple other things we left out. Where they're from,
well,
what general area they're from.
Right. You can also do the ruling Orisha of the clan, and then you can also find out the supporting Orisha.
Yeah, the associated.
Right. And a lot of times, that person that receives that roots reading should receive that Orisha of that clan
to reestablish.
But then
family,
also you might realize that any other divinations that you may get, those Orishas, them supporting Orishas may come up. So somewhere down the line, you may have to receive those Orishas or deal with those supporting Orisha.
Yeah, that's the general overview, though. I think we might have left out a couple of things, but I think those are.
You find out what part of Africa those ancestors come from.
Right.
You can also look into what was the. So let's say they were from Dahomey. That can give you an indication of those ancestors may have been high priests or voodoo worshipers or warriors. The Odu kind of lays everything out. The last name you get for the clan,
the name,
and if that person receiving the roots reading doesn't have a African name, then that's the time to do it.
Give them one, bang. Right. That's the other thing. So it's huge. You get a lot of things in the Dafai delay, in the roots reading. Something else I was about to say and it just slipped my mind, but I think that was everything we wanted to cover from that. But it's powerful.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's very powerful.
It's definitely a system that you want to kind of embrace when you're coming into African spirituality. It's the blueprint that gives you the whole overview of how you need to navigate. You know what I mean?
Benny.
How you need to move. Learning this culture and spirituality.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. Also gives you information on just the general family dynamics of that lineage. Any inner conflict or turmoil or things that are themes in the family so why is that important? Because there's some things that when we see it and we say it, it can be related to things that are going on in the family now.
Yeah.
So maybe it could be some curses involved in the family, some certain things that need to be broken so that the living family and the unborn ancestors that are waiting to return will come back in a better situation of alignment through the power of ancestor veneration.
Yeah, because it's about healing.
I say. Healing. Man, it's a lot about healing.
Yes.
It's about knowledge of self. It's about self-love. It's about, a lot of things, a lot of positive, powerful things. So I think what we'll do is we'll do a part 2 to this.
Yes.
Where we will discuss, setting up your ancestor altar, that's the basic foundation. But if for people that want to go further, what are the next steps and the highest form of ancestor veneration that we have in the diaspora?
Yes.
So we will do a part 2 to this and go through that. We want to thank all of our citizens of the Let's Talk IFA Nation, everyone that has been supporting us. Please continue to like, share, and subscribe. For any divination or roots readings, or if you have a question that you want us to address in the Let's Talk IFA question and answer series, just email us at letstalkifa@gmail.com. I am Awo Ifa Jaminire.
I am Awo Ifa Tegunshet.
And you were tuned into
the best,
the greatest
podcast
on the planet Earth.
Let's Talk IFA. Odabo, Ashewa.
Ashewa, Odabo, Ireo, Bobo Ire, Relopo Lopo, Abo, Ato, Asori, Wori, Wofun. Ashe.